Jeff is a business and advertising professional who has a knack for turning taboo subjects into relatable and viral material. His business venture started at the age of 12 when he wanted to go to a private school, and his parents, one of how many children? 8 siblings, only could afford public schools. So he figured out how to fix this. He lived in Idaho on a potato farm. So he decided to have a business plan to overcome this obstacle. He sold his potatoes in Utah. I often see these signs, but I never need 50 pounds of potatoes. So I haven't been with a family of 2 now. We don't need that. But he loaded up his family car with all the potatoes he could fit in it. I don't know how you did that at 12. Wrote a sales pitch and got his dad to agree to drive him. There you go. Once in Utah, he was faced with making his very first sales pitch on his own. He started by reading sales pitch verbatim and was able to gain confidence as he continued. By the end of the day, he'd earned $100 towards his tuition cost. From his humble beginnings selling potatoes out of the family car, he has learned how to market and sell a wide range of products, both for himself and for others. He's married with 5 children, four girls and 1 boy, and we're thrilled to have him speak to you. Will you please welcome Jeff to the stage with me?
When I was 11, 12 years old, I got my dad to take me down to Utah with potatoes because he worked in Utah, and I sold potatoes door to door. At the time, nobody was doing that. And then, like, my neighbor knocked on my door last year and said, "Our school's doing a fundraiser selling Idaho potatoes." And I was like, whoa, this has come, there's like a little mini industry now around kids earning school stuff with potatoes. So I want to talk about what success looks like what it actually looks like versus what people see, what you see on Twitter, what you see in news articles, what PR teams put together. And so start out, I want to talk about what outsiders see, and this is a pretty relaxed, this will be a pretty casual presentation, not like a keynote or something that I've done, because I put this together because I was thinking about what would students want to hear. What would I want to hear back when I was at BYU studying business when a speaker comes? And it's not the same things that I would teach at a keynote presentation at a conference. So how many people here want to be like, your pathway is like Ernst & Young or a big, huge Fortune 500 company, just by raise of hand? How many people here want to be an entrepreneur, build your own thing? Okay. And how many here are aspiring to build something that is a lifestyle business, like $1 million, hundreds of thousands to millions a year, or how in that world? And how many want to build like the next unicorn? That's your aspiration. Unicorn world. We got a few of those. Okay, so that'll just help me a little bit as I go through this. So what outsiders see. So I created with my brothers an ad agency called Harmon Brothers, and we did, if you've seen any of these, Poopery, Squatty Potty, Purple Mattress, Kizik's, which I saw Tom was wearing Kizik's shoes. We've done these campaigns around Lumi deodorant. Do you guys recognize these commercials? So if you take the top 25 most viral social video campaigns of all time, our agency has done more of them than any other agency in the world. And so people see these numbers and they see billions of views, hundreds of millions of dollars in tracked sales, and they go, wow, these guys have just got it figured out. Another thing that people see, who's aware of dry bar comedy? Okay, so we started that. I'll tell a little bit of the story of why we started it. But dry bar comedy we just basically said, look, the biggest comedians at the time were Jim Gaffigan, Bill Cosby, but with a huge asterisk, Brian Regan, Jerry Seinfeld, and these are all comics that do comedy that is safe, brand safe, and safe for everybody to watch. It's not super edgy. And we're like, what if we just took all the funniest comics, because there's thousands of comics out there that are very funny, and just said, hey, why don't you do a clean set for us, and let's see what that does. Most of the comedians on dry bar comedy are not normally clean. So we started up an entire TV series around it. We've now filmed 300 comedy specials. We have the largest digital library of stand-up comedy in the world. We get more views per week than Comedy Central Digital's gets in a year. We get over 1 billion views a year right now on Dry Bar. And we've turned several comics into huge stars. So that's Dry Bar Comedy. That's another thing you see. Who's seen The Chosen? We've got a group of people. I'm going to go ahead and show the trailer, and then I'll talk just briefly about this.
I think I hear a story.
Can we turn?
Impossible things can happen. Maybe. I can never forget what I saw.
I'm so sorry, I don't actually know your name.
I'm Jesus.
Are you dangerous?
Maybe your son. I saw him. It was incredible. I need to know if we have a problem.
The man claimed to be God. False prophecy.
Again, I ask you, is there a problem? The so-called miracle worker?
Jesus of Nazareth.
Apparently something good can come from Nazareth.
Throw me like a stone in the water, watch the mud rise up.
If we're going to have a question and answer session, every time we do something wrong, you stop. It's going to be a very annoying time together for all of us.
There are righteous men on the lookout for you, and they are weighing every word you say.
That's not real.
This is different.
Get used to different.
We didn't choose him. He chose us.
I see you. Oh, I really don't like that man. Follow me, and you'll see more.
There was one way, and I am completely different. Everything that happened in between was him.
And so it's time. Let's go.
So Newsweek just did a story on The Chosen. New York Times just did one. It now, so Yellowstone was one of Utah's biggest film projects. The Chosen has more viewership than Yellowstone. It has bigger social interaction than Game of Thrones, according to Newsweek. Because we're social guys, so we understand social. And our goal is to turn this into, so far we've had over 100 million views on it. The Chosen app, which you can just get on your phone, it's the first show to ever launch worldwide, every single country in the world at one time on its own app called The Chosen. And that app's been downloaded over 10 million times. The Chosen did over $30 million last year in sales. And we're filming season 2. We filmed half of season 2 in Utah at the Goshen set. And it's 9.7 on IMDb, so it's one of the highest rated TV series of all time. It's got over 12,000 reviews. It's got a 100% positive score from Rotten Tomatoes critics. So this seems like this huge success, but I'm gonna give a little bit of story, and our goal is to actually reach 1 billion people worldwide in the next 5 years. This is season 1 of 7 seasons. The crucifixion won't happen until season 6. And by the end of 7 seasons, we hope our goal is to reach over 1 billion people. So now, talk about the stories you don't see. So that's what the stuff you're gonna see in the press and the headlines. So I wanna just talk about Harmon Brothers. An experience, Harmon Brothers almost didn't make it. So our first campaign we did, we left a little company called Aura Brush that we had co-founded and started an ad agency. And when we started it, we signed up with Poopery because we knew the founder. And I wrote up a term sheet, like a letter of intent with the founder, just quickly wrote it up, said this is what we're gonna do, this is how we get paid, and if we do really, really well, we just want to have big bonuses that do well with the company. And no attorneys looked at it, we signed it, and then Poopery blew up. Boing Boing, the largest blog in the world at the time picked it up, and Huffington Post picked it up, and it just went crazy. This commercial drove them from $4 million in sales to $40 million in sales in about 12 months. They're now a $300 million company. But what people don't realize, for us, where we were left holding a bag, where we were scrambling just to cover our costs on building this show. And to my shock, and I guess maybe I was just inexperienced, but as soon as it became very successful and we had these big bonuses built out, it was like, chop us off. We won't even pay you your costs. We barely got them recouped. And we were left at the end of this campaign without any money, like trying to figure out how we were even going to pay the people that were working on it. And then we took I always told people with ad campaigns, I was like, I will only work on products I love. Unless my family's starving, then I'll do whatever. I'll sell pretty much anything. So there was about a year where we were just kind of taking on these little projects, just trying to keep afloat. And we almost died. One thing Tom mentioned is, he said, did you ever imagine growing up in Idaho, where my nearest neighbor was a quarter mile away, that you would be in ad business and taking on Hollywood? And I said, no. We had 3 TV stations growing up. You could get a 4th one if you took the metal hangers out of the closet and, wound it up and hung it from the window. You could get a 4th station. So this hadn't even crossed my mind. This all came about at school at BYU. Devin Graham, who does Devin Supertramp, he was my roommate, and he shot a commercial, and I kind of failed into this, meaning I was trying to help this doctor get his tongue cleaner or a brush out the door and sell it. And everything wasn't working, and we just failed until like the last option was, let's try a YouTube video, and I'll have my roommate film it. So that kind of started me into this world, and my brother into this world of advertising. And then we started learning about Pixar's history, and we realized they were an ad agency that jumped into film. We learned about Michael Bay, same thing. There's a huge percentage of Hollywood that started in ads, and so we're like, that sounds fun. That sounds meaningful. Let's go from ads to a film world. So Harmon Brothers' near-death experience was poopery. Then VidAngel Studios, we started. VidAngel is a company where you can skip out scenes of movies. So if you've paid for a movie, then VidAngel goes in and cuts out parts that people may find objectionable for kids or for themselves. And this company did really well. So we started in 2014. We did like $19,000. We had a near-death experience there, but I'm not going to talk as much about that one. 2015, we did a little bit more. 2016, we jump up to $8 million. And then we get sued by the largest film studio in the world, Disney. And we learned, I remember talking to attorneys as we were trying to figure out how to build a defense strategy, but we had learned that every single company that's ever tried to skip content in movies has been sued. We were just one of I remember it was 14 or 17 other companies that had been shut down due to this. And there was one survivor, but they're like a survivor without legs, which is ClearPlay. But they had survived with these DVD players. And they kind of left them alone because they considered the DVD player old technology that doesn't work very well. So we get sued, and we end up in a 4-year legal battle. Disney spends, our attorneys estimated they spent over $30 million trying to crush our company, put us out of business. If you get sued by Disney, you usually go out of business. And I remember we tried to talk to them about hey, can we just work this out? What are you actually concerned about with what we're doing? We sent you letters before we launched this, explaining what we're doing and asked you for feedback. You didn't respond. And their response was, we'll see you in court. And then we start this legal battle, or we didn't start it, they started it, but we get in this legal battle and we're talking to attorneys, and one of the attorneys says, when I was getting done with my law school, and I don't remember, I think it was one of the big copyright law schools down in California, his professor on their last day said, what have you learned about, what's the most important thing I've taught you about copyright? And they were all, taking their swings at it. And he said, no, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing to know about copyright is don't F with Disney. And so we went through the ringer with Disney. We didn't have very much money, so we went to the crowd and said, we're basically dead if you guys don't help, but if you would like us to fight this battle and not roll over, we would like to raise $5 million to fight this battle, and we'll do a crowd investment round with Regulation A+, which was a new law that Obama signed that allows companies to raise up to $50 million in crowdfunding. And in 5 days, we raised $10 million to fight the battle. So that was a miracle, and that happened, we raised that money and closed it just a few days before the end of 2016, where the court orders that we shut down our filtering service. So we go from $8 million in a skyrocketing company that's growing at twice the speed of Netflix at the same time to $0. And it takes us 6 months to retool the whole system, to do a new system that supposedly works the way that Disney say they want it to work, and what it does is it signs into Amazon and Google, Amazon and Netflix, and then streams your content from there with the filters in place. And we launch that, and we get back up to a couple $1 million by the end of the year, but we've had to lay off employees. It was a very dark period in our history. And we launch that night that we got, or the next day, we launched Dry Bar Comedy and say, we're going to start a studio. If they're not going to let us filter content, we're just going to have to make our own content. We're going to have to replace them because it's ridiculous. We actually had experts in court show that they made money, more money if we hadn't existed than if we did exist. But that's not what the battle's about. So we go to zero, and then we launch Dry Bar, and Dry Bar goes 3 seasons without making even close. Like we're making like 10%, 10 cents on the dollar back of what we're investing into this project. And each season that we have to throw another several hundred or $700,000 at it, we're like, do we do this again? Are we just crazy? And we did it again, and then by season 3, suddenly it picks up. And we start pulling out of our mess, and by 2018, we're almost back up to the same revenue when we were crushed. Then, 2019, we climb a little more, and so we've got this TV series, Dry Bar, that's successful, and we're like, what are we going to do for our next thing? And one of my older brothers calls me, and he says, hey, why don't we do what we did for the lawsuit, to fund the lawsuit for every film project? These are big projects. Why doesn't the crowd who wants it to exist fund the movies, rather than a handful of Hollywood executives deciding what movies get funded? I said, if we can raise $10 million in 5 days, maybe we can raise enough money to do a decent TV series. And so we start on The Chosen, and I get this little short film called The Shepherd. I don't know if anybody's seen this Christmas special called The Shepherd, but it's a 20-minute short film that cost $85,000 to make. And I call the filmmaker, and he has just gone through the lowest moment of his career. He's from Hollywood. He just flopped with a movie called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, which he did with Blumhouse Entertainment. And he made this short film kind of for his church. And I watched it, and it was just like a flood of ideas just poured into my mind about this will be a pilot. Maybe he can build a series off this. We'll raise the money off this little short film for an entire series about the life of Christ in the style that this short film's done. We'll launch it on, all these ideas just poured into my mind, and I feel like it was one of those moments where the ideas were not my ideas. They were inspiration, revelation type moment. So I call, and then I show it to my brother, and I said, Neil, you need to watch this. This is the series that we're going to launch our studio off of, like our crowdfunding studio. And he says, no, we're not going to launch it off a Bible project. That's for churches to do, and we're not going to do that. And I said, just watch it. And he watches it, and he takes off the earphones at the end, and he just said, this is why we made VidAngel, is to launch this type of content. And so I said, well, what am I going to do? We're announcing that we're filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in a few weeks to protect ourselves from Disney as a defensive move with Disney. We are about to go through a trial. They're trying to get us completely shut down. We're a filtering company, which Dallas Jenkins is not a big fan of filtering. Before this, he didn't understand how it worked. He just thought we edit movies rather than giving people a remote to skip content, an automatic remote. We're Mormons, and he's a hardcore evangelical who, his dad is Jerry B. Jenkins, who wrote the Left Behind series, which is one of the best-selling Christian books of all time. And we're going to crowdfund it, which is crazy. This is like an idea that nobody's done. And so I say a prayer, get on the phone with Dallas for the first time, and he explains, I do have this concept. But I've got this concept I'd love to do of a Bible series that is about the perspective of the people around him, and it's real. It's a real, like, Jesus will feel like a real person. He won't speak in the King's English, and he won't be white. The guy who plays Jesus in this is Egyptian. And the guy who plays Simon Peter to the right of Jesus right here, he's from Nazareth. He grew up in Nazareth. So it's going to be a cast of people who are from the area. And I explained it to him, and to my surprise, he just says, okay. I said, well, you and your wife fly out, and let's try it. So we go through the process of a couple year process to raise $10 million from the 19,000 people to fund the first season of this show. Dallas calls it was like crawling on glass. It was so hard to get this first thing done. And it was in the middle of a tens of millions of dollar lawsuit with Disney. And then as we get this launched, right in the middle of filming season 1, we go into a courtroom in LA, and even though we had attorneys teach us how to do filtering legally and tell us exactly what to do, the judge tells the jury that attorneys didn't give us advice. Okay, so we're in this kangaroo court in LA and we're trying to figure out why this judge is so mean to us. And we end up one of our friends runs into a friend of the judge, and he says, why is this guy doing this to VidAngel? And he said, well, Disney's the biggest player in town, and this guy wants to hold office one day. Like, there's no way he's going against the mouse. There's no way he's doing that. So we end up in a situation where my brother in court is sitting at the witness chair, and they're saying, why did you make this decision? And he says, well, I wrote in my journal the night after I prayed about how we should handle the situation, follow advice of counsel. Follow your attorneys. Objection, the judge chews him out in front of the jury like he's lied, and then says, you can't throw that out. You did not use advice of counsel. It rips into our attorneys. Anyway, we end up with the largest, as willful infringement like Pirates, with the largest copyright infringement per work in history, in Hollywood history. More than like if you were straight up pirating stuff, not making them money. So $62.5 million. That night was like a low point for me, because we've gone 7 years of trying to fight this battle, And then Disney's plan is to take that back to the bankruptcy court and put us into Chapter 7. And it was a very good thing that 2 years before we filed Chapter 11 to protect against this worst case scenario. And bankruptcy protects you from a predator. That's Chapter 11 bankruptcy can protect you from a predator. And it worked. And they were unable to get us shut down, but just by the skin of our teeth. Like, we barely made it through. Then we're moving into a bankruptcy hearing, a contested bankruptcy hearing, where we're saying we'll pay off the entire $62.5 million over 14 years. We'll pay them off with interest. And they're saying, no, we want them shut down to the judge. And the judge is like, why don't you want to be paid back? You know? And because it wasn't about that. And finally, what happened is some series of events, The Chosen explodes, it's making enormous amounts of money. The pandemic hits, Disney's losing like $25 million a day off their parks after the pandemic hits. And they finally come to the table and arrange a settlement agreement. And we end up settling and having we pay them $9.9 million over 14 years. So not bad considering how we came out. And our only rule is we cannot touch Disney's content or Disney or Warner Brothers content forever. We agreed that we won't touch their stuff for filtering. So another near-death experience, okay? There's so many crazy things that happen during this. Like, it is a story that if I hadn't lived it, I could hardly believe it. And then 2020, we did $47 million. So we've taken in $13 million in funding, and overall, I think we've done over $76 million in revenue so far. And so this is what people think success looks like. That's what it actually looks like. And how much time do I have, just so I can?
You've still got 15 minutes.
Great, perfect. Okay, so this is very true. And the question that people ask is, so how do you survive your company's near-death moments? Every single startup I know has had a near-death moment. Josh James talks about how he was sleeping on a floor in a room, laying on a floor that has no furniture in his house, crying, trying to figure out how am I going to pay my employees next week. You know, there's every single company's got these moments. We happen to have like a bunch of them, but a lot of companies have a bunch. You read Tesla, Elon's, the book called Elon Musk, it just full of Tesla almost died over and over and over again. So I just want to talk about one idea to help entrepreneurs understand how to position your life as you come out of school to be ready to build a company. And I would say it's focusing on burn rate. Does anybody know what burn rate means?
The amount of money you spend.
The amount of money you spend. Yeah, so is it the amount? So the amount of money you spend, but that goes down in your cash reserves, right? So it's the amount of money you spend that you didn't make back up in revenues. So it's how much money are you losing each month? How much do you burn every month? So, so you can. This is, you know, it's burning cash. You're burning cash. How much money are you spending? And so, top causes of company failure, according to, well, I've got the source down below, but so no market fit is one, ran out of cash, not the right team, got out-competed, pricing, cost issues. So this is from Crunchbase 2015. It's a little bit old, but I'm sure it hasn't changed too much. And so the two I want to focus on are run out of cash and cost issues, because these are highly related. So if you, and together, those are about half of all companies die from burn rate problems. This is, they just burn more cash than they can. And so burn rate, the one way to explain it is runway. So if you run out of runway with an airplane, you end up in like this type of a situation. And then there's different types of runways depending on the kind of business you want to create. I remember in business school, I was an exchange student in Sao Paulo, and I got up and I gave this big presentation on this huge company idea I wanted to build. But I didn't understand the dynamics of how long it would take to get there. So like, if you're a big company like Amazon took billions and billions of dollars of investment to get off the ground. Huge runway. It's this big, huge airplane that investors invested and invested and invested for, I don't know how many years it was. I can't think off the top of my head, but and then eventually they get off the ground and they don't have to take on investment every quarter or every year at that point. Their burn rate, they didn't burn all their capital before they got off the ground. Jet.com was burning money to the point where Walmart had to buy them because they just ran out of runway. Multi-billion-dollar project as well. But if you're doing like a little, have you ever wondered why there's so many little Sodalicious type shops? It's because they're little companies and they take no effort to get off the ground. So your burn rate, your runway can be like 10 feet and then you're profitable, right? So, and then there's everything in between. That's the reason why you see so many little startups doing yogurt shops, or the newest trend is these are very easy entry points. They're not difficult to get into. Take little runway, little cash, and you're up and moving. So here's an example, case study, pets.com, raised $300 million. They bought Super Bowl ads. They spent it all. They ended up with $600,000 in revenues, and they went bankrupt. They were ahead of their time. It's one issue. But it's okay to be ahead of your time if you understand burn rate. So, or if you can figure, at least you have more time to figure it out. So they did not understand burn rates very well. It's during the dot-com thing, and they spent more time thinking about their little puppet commercials than they did about, and this group is probably too young to even remember these commercials, right? Okay, so these were a big deal. Very funny commercials at the time. In the YouTube world, these are probably pretty lackluster, but for 2000, they were pretty good. So 3 ways to extend a startup runway. 1, extend the runway, get investment, sell part of your company to an investor. Number 2, accelerate your speed, get sales. Just dive into sales and sales and sales. Sales can cover a multitude of sins. And then lighten the load, throw people and stuff out of the plane. So you just get rid of costs. And that's what we had to do when we got crushed by Disney. We threw out half the company and we felt terrible. We hired back, I think, 90% of them over time, but it was a very, very painful moment. So living like an entrepreneur, you need to be thinking about burn rate. So an entrepreneur, as an individual, you need to live on a low burn rate, and I'll explain this a little bit more. So you're like the little plane. It doesn't take that much to keep you alive. Well, it shouldn't. And you want to keep it as light as possible. So live within your means is 10 minutes? Okay. Live within your means is a misnomer. So for an entrepreneur, you need to live within your needs if you're going to start a company. You do not live within your means, you live within your needs. I have tried to hire many good engineers, great engineers. They're at Google, they're at some big company, and they want desperately to get out of that culture and come into a startup culture. But they've bought $1 million home, they have cars, they have all of these things that they have to keep servicing, and so their personal burn rate is too high to go from Google's $400,000 a year salary down to minus $150,000 a year salary, or maybe in a really like first startup level, you might be like a $50,000 a year salary, and then take the rest in equity. They can't do it because their burn rate's too high. They are burning too much cash to move. They're trapped at Google. They're trapped at Facebook. They're trapped in those worlds because their burn rate has just grown to the point they can't get away. They're a slave to their own lifestyle. So so are you a slave to your burn rate? If you suddenly had to reduce income or have no income, how long could you last? So food. How much money do you need per month for food? Do you eat out all the time? Do you go to restaurants? Or are you pretty scrappy and get your nutrition? Nutrition's really important as an entrepreneur, but get your nutrition through different ways. Mortgage or rent. How much are you paying per month in mortgage and rent costs? Appliances. Do you have car loans? Do you have credit cards? Do you have student loans? Do you have toys, boats, snowmobiles? All of these things increase your burn rate. And so, as an entrepreneur, as you're starting off, there have been at least 2 times during VidAngel's history that my brother and I, who are the co-founders, have just gone off salary. Because the founder is the first one to take a pay cut. And we just go off salary. One time it was for like 9 months. Another time it was for a different amount because we want to make sure that we extend our runway. And we had set up our lives in a way that we could actually do this. And so when you're an entrepreneur, it's basically like lots of income, no income, lots of income, no income. And so you have to say, all right, so for like a home, I ignored Dave Ramsey's advice, and I got a 30-year mortgage instead of a 15-year mortgage because I knew that I could pay it off in 15 years, but there's going to be times in those 15 years where I need the $1,500 a month payment instead of the $2,000 a month payment. That $500 per month in burn rate can be the difference between me succeeding in my company or falling off the end of the runway. So let's see here. So live within your needs, think burn rate. 3 ways to extend your personal runway. Extend the runway, increase savings. Accelerate your speed, increase your income. Lighten the load, throw people or stuff out of the plane. So I don't recommend throwing people unless it's like an expensive girlfriend that you're not going to, or boyfriend you're not going to keep. Then don't keep them. But if it's your wife, you should, yeah. So a friend of mine who's a big investor here in the Valley, Brandon Hatch, he made the statement, if I lost my income today, I could go back to flipping hamburgers and survive. He's worth a significant amount of money, but he has set up his life in a way that his burn rate, even at this point, he and his wife can just flip a switch and say, all right, our home is taken care of, our cars are taken care of, our food is taken care of. I can go to McDonald's and flip hamburgers and survive if I had to. That's his mentality. So this is an example. When we bought our house, we were trying to decide whether to rent another place because we were having our 4th child. And so we have 5 kids under 8 years old and under. And we were trying to decide, are we going to rent? And we were at a $600 a month place to rent. Now that sounds really cheap now because inflation's going crazy, but in the housing market's going nuts. So, or we could upgrade to a house that was big enough for us with 2 bathrooms and 2 bedrooms because we were in this little tiny place. But it was like $1,250 a month. So I pulled out built this huge spreadsheet, and I figured out if I go and I take my savings and I do a down payment on a house in Lehigh, this old house, and then I take $40,000 and redo the basement as an Airbnb, and then I rent the basement and I get like at least a few $100s a month, then I will be in a situation where I have a lower burn rate owning a house than I do renting this other house that I don't own. Then I put it up. My Airbnb made $1,800 a month consistently, and I was living for free. So my burn rate went to 0. So that was a really big deal for us at the beginning of starting up these businesses. So that's an example of how to reduce burn rate, how to get creative in the way you reduce your burn rate. And so we have a mother-in-law apartment we rent. We got 5 kids, but we do a 1-car family. This sounds crazy too. So we have a minivan, Toyota Sienna. We've had 2 of them. First we had a really old one that cost $2,300 to buy, and then eventually I upgraded to a 2015, and because the old one died. So then we put all our kids in it, can fit everybody, plus my mother-in-law from Brazil lives in our apartment as well now. And I just have a bus pass and a train pass, and I ride my bike to the train, come down to Provo to work, and then I go back and forth that way. And then anytime I'm in a pinch, I just grab Uber. And I can grab Uber 2-3 times a week and still only spend like 1/3 of what I would on a second car. I have total freedom to be able to do that, and it saves us a ton of money. So that keeps our burn rate down because we own our van. But that's, you just kind of gotta say every dollar counts when you're an entrepreneur on burn rate. Your monthly cost, how low can you get your monthly costs and extend your runway in the worst case scenario? And then if you get a chance, pay off your house, because that reduces burn rate really significantly. So either go with a 30-more-year mortgage or go for the whole thing, get rid of the whole thing. I don't think you should try to get rid of it as fast as you can when things are going good, but make sure you have that long runway when if things get bad. So, Bob Unser, success is where preparation and opportunity meet. There are so many entrepreneurs that die, their companies die, not them, because they don't understand how to build a life that allows them to have a really long runway. And with that,
you have time for a question or two.
Yep. So I have expectations. My goal is, in the next 5 years, VidAngel, with a different name, which is not announced yet, but you'll see it next month, will crowdfund in the next 5 years $1 billion of content over the next 5 years, over 300 TV series. So we're out to replace Disney, but with content that feeds the soul. Content that has meaning and matters to the communities that are, so like Star Trek, for example, when it first came out, they were going to cancel it, the very first season of Star Trek. And fans, there was too small of a group of people watching, and CBS was like, we're not going to do this. But fans sent in 100,000 letters to them. Now imagine if they were just allowed to just fund the next season themselves. They would have done it. You don't need to ask some executives, you just do it through the crowd. Or another example would be like Firefly. Anybody seen Firefly? It's one of the greatest TV series of all time, by the way. Even if you're young, it's still really good. Takes a couple episodes to get into. It would have had a second season if the crowd was allowed to make that decision instead of with their own money. Okay, all right, next question. That kind of support helps. Part of our settlement agreement, so we're done with the battle now. Part of our settlement agreement is that we will no longer lobby. We can't lobby Congress anymore. So that was a hard part to swallow for us. But those kind of things back in the time, so there was a huge battle. We had like 2 lobbyists working on Capitol Hill trying to get because there's a law that says what we were doing was legal, but California courts just basically negated the law. It doesn't. It's a dead letter now, and so it's mostly dead. There's still some hope there. So, but there's like every single Disney lobbyist was fighting our 2 lobbyists, it was crazy. That's a whole different story. But yes, and his grandfather is likely going to get a very good ROI on his investment. We had attorneys look at our next ones for sure, but it's something like, part of it is if an entrepreneur or a partner decides to, so I had a friend talk about how his dad quit his job because every year the boss would come in and say, can you look at all our contracts and review them for loopholes that allow us to get out of costs? If you're going back to your contracts to look for ways out of what you agreed to, you're doing it wrong. And that's what they did to us, is that they went back and said, I know I agreed to this, but my attorney says that the language in here isn't strong in a court. And then our attorney said, oh, you can fight this battle. Like, in fact, an attorney said, you have such a good case, I'll just fight it on contingency. And we had to make the decision, do we go fight for a few $1 million of income for 18 months to 2 years and destroy our lives? It will destroy our lives, it will destroy her life. Or do we just walk away and go build bigger value? I am so grateful that I got advice from an entrepreneur in Texas that told me, it's not worth it. Don't go fight that legal battle. Like, I've been through them. Don't go fight it. You will build more value by far in that period of time than the $2 or $3 million you could have made off of that contract. So you're always going to feel like nobody's going to mess you over until it becomes real. It's like at the beginning of a founding of a company, everybody's just like fun. But as soon as it becomes worth money, fights start happening even with like the best of friends, and sometimes it destroys relationships. And you have to take a very forgiving approach, which is, because I only have like maybe a handful of people in my life that I trust to the point I would know that we would always figure it out. Everyone else, there's levels of trust, but when things get real, they start betraying each other because there's self-interest, or I've got to pay this bill, or or envy, or whatever. And so the way that I look at it is I say, as long as you know that the friend you have, this is the kind of partner you want. As long as you know that they have an honest view, even if their view's different, they think that they signed a different deal than you signed. As long as both of you are truly being honest, then the truth has to be somewhere between what you think and what they think. Even if you think you're right, they think they're right and they're both honest. I'm not talking about poopery where they're just trying to get out of it. I'm talking about somebody who's truly trying to figure it out, and you have to come somewhere in between and resolve and forgive and let go, or else you'll lose that relationship. And relationships are always more important than money, 100% of the time.
Thank you very much. Can we give him a hand?